This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is another unique optometrist. He's an accomplished leader in optometry with a remarkable blend of clinical expertise and the entrepreneurial spirit. He's a nationally recognized speaker with special interest in contact lenses and dry eye disease. His leadership roles, notably as the current president of the Mountain District Optometry Society, highlight his commitment to advancing the field of optometry. He's a co-owner and optometrist of Northlake Eye. Please welcome Dr. Ryan Corte. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Ankit. I really appreciate you having me. And as I mentioned prior to hitting record, I love the podcast so far. You've done a great job.
Awesome. Thank you. Your check's in the mail. So I appreciate the compliment. A lot of people will get you everywhere. Just kidding. But let's jump into the first question, right? Like I like to ask everyone, what was the most important thing that helped you build your empire?
Yeah. So full transparency, I didn't really jump into optometry to build an empire. The biggest thing is being patient with the process. In school, you're learning about clinical care. You're learning about how to become the best possible optometrist to serve patients' eye health and vision care needs. And of course, during that process, you learn about ownership. You learn about being an associate. But what you really don't understand is the big picture, what that looks like getting out. And I've had a business background. I went to undergrad at Michigan State and actually was majoring in business prior to switching over to graduate in 4 years instead of 5. So I've always been interested in, how practice works. And so when I came out, I did my residency at the Illinois College of Optometry in primary care and ocular disease. And I was always looking to practice in North Carolina. And so when I landed down there, I ended up at 2 different private practices and was learning through the experience of being an associate and trying to help build their practices, but also being patient with, what do I do? Do I buy into a practice? Do I start cold? Do I go and take on a sublease? What do I do? And what ended up happening was I shifted gears from those 2 practices and kind of shifted over to one primary practice that I was at. And I, had the conversation with the owners about potential buy-in and what that would look like. And prior to even really getting things evaluated or doing anything, I got a call from my now business partner, Dr. Rachel Rubel. And it was essentially like, hey, there's a sublease location opening up. It's a LensCrafters sublease. And the doctor's not selling. He's kind of just walking away. It has 30 years of book of business, and we can step right in and get the ball rolling. And I was hesitant, right? Because I didn't really know anything about partnering with corporate optometry. It's not really spoken highly about during optometry school. And so I didn't even know what a sublease really was, at least the full capacity. I just thought it was either you're in a private office or you're in a corporate office. But I took that leap of faith after talking to my wife and talking more to my business partner and learning more about it. And so I think through that patience, an opportunity opened up where I didn't have to dive into a large loan right off the front end to go ahead and set up a private office. Yes, is it different? Do we have to abide by the contract and the rules of, the sublease? Of course. But, every way that you can practice in optometry has a unique challenge in regards to whether you're going totally private, whether you're an employee, whether you're a sublease owner, whatever it may be. And so that patience has really paid off.
So if you distilled it down to one thesis statement, like, hey, this is the one thing I think was most important, help me grow my empire, what would you say in all that? I have a hunch what you might say, but I want to hear it from your words.
Yeah, patience with the process, being flexible with how life kind of turns in every different part of the journey, and then being resilient during times of challenge. I know that's a run-on sentence, but I do feel that it kind of does wrap it all together. It's patience is one thing, but you also have to be flexible and you need to be resilient because we're all going to run into challenges.
And it sounds like if I can make an analogy, if I had to narrow it down to one analogy, one thing, it sounds like you're understanding the currents and the winds and riding them at the right times, the right moments, which sometimes requires patience, sometimes requires action. Maybe it doesn't. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that's a metaphor that you're trying to describe. Is that inaccurate to say, or is that about right?
Ankit, you nailed it. And I will say a lot of doctors out there, they want to force something because they're ready. Like in their mind, they're like, I want to own a practice. Great. what does the process look like to do so? Are you putting together the right steps to get yourself educated on even some of the basics, right? If you're in a clinic right now and you're an associate doctor, ask how to learn more about billing and coding or managing people or, all of the different facets that goes into running an office. And as you build out your comfort level, opportunities will present themselves when you plant the right seeds and you're patient with the process. Build a network.
So give me an example of where the patience paid off for you in growing your businesses. Um, yeah, so give me like one or two examples where you felt like, you know
Sure.
what, if I hadn't been patient, this wouldn't have been there for me.
Well, if I wasn't patient, I would have either opened cold right away, and I just kind of was hesitant because I didn't feel like I had the tools available to do so. And there's a lot of great companies out there now that help you do so. But when I graduated, I feel like the options were limited, or at least ones that I were comfortable with. And then buying into a practice, I don't recommend anybody ever buys into a practice immediately after starting there. You got to get to know who are these people you're going into business with, unless
Yeah.
you're buying them out, and that has to be, evaluated. So I think patience with myself, with my comfort level of what I wanted to do and learning more about that part of the process. And then once I was patient and getting into this, relationship with lens crafters and having a sublease, I didn't try to force a second location. There was a doctor locally that was looking to kind of transition over a very viable location in a great space. And then so we acquired that one, and then a couple of years went by, and there was two doctors that were walking away from a two location sublease set up in Asheville, and I relocated for that. So it was really stressful. It was a huge leap of faith. I don't recommend it to people, but I also can tell you sometimes you got to jump into the fire and learn from those experiences.
And one of the things I like to get to is when do you think being patient didn't serve you in your business? Because it's not always like there's a thing called overuse of strengths,
Yeah.
and I tend to do that sometimes with some of my strengths. But I'm curious, has being too patient not been great for you?
Yeah, sometimes your patience, maybe with like team members, right,
Mm.
and their development, and you're trying to give them the opportunity to be successful in the clinic, to operate at a high level, and you see that diamond in the rough. Maybe if you hired someone, you're like, I don't know if this person's going to work out based on your initial few weeks or months of experience. Sometimes you got to pull the plug. Sometimes you got to really identify. All right, I've been patient enough. I don't see this working out. And so I would say in some of my early staffing challenges, I like to be understandable of people's weaknesses and try to amplify their strengths and be patient with their development. But sometimes you just got to make a call and just say, this is not working out. This person's called out too much, or they've made too many mistakes, or we've had this conversation too many times. It's
That's
just not panning out.
that's very Peter Drucker of you. So I think that's one of his direct quotes, actually. Peter Drucker. For those who don't know, he's a organizational development. One of the folks about management and leadership. He's got great books to read. Highly recommend reading his books as well. But yeah, that's one of the things he says is something. I'm going to butcher this, but something to the effect of leadership is um, something around accentuating the strengths so that the weaknesses become irrelevant. So it was kind of what you were saying there a little bit, but so I want to build off that a little bit. So it sounds like if we're going back to the metaphor, the analogy of reading the winds and the currents, sounds like, hey, maybe it was too patient and the winds took you a little too far east and you wanted to go a little more west with staff members. How'd you learn from that? Like, what'd you change after that? Like, I think that learning piece might be important for folks to understand is like, how'd you figure out when too much was too much time and too much patience with staff?
Yeah, probably trial by fire, right? I mean, so I came into optometry school with a little bit more of a unique background. I was actually a recruiter during undergrad. So during the summer, I had a family member who ran an engineering and IT recruiting firm. And so I did a lot of hiring. I did a lot of job listings. I did a lot of interviewing and onboarding. But what I didn't do is actually manage the people once they're in my clinic, right? Because those people went to these large tier one automotive suppliers, and once I got them hired, like good, they're on their way. Like I did my job. I bridged the gap. And so there are times where you know we had to build out an organizational structure. We had none of that, especially when we scaled the practice. We have, your basic role of an optometric tech and front desk individual. We have an associate office manager role, now an office manager role. We have a practice director that oversees everything. And then, of course, everybody kind of funnels up and feeds up to us. And trying to iron out those roles, trying to iron out how they need to be paid, how they need to be bonused, how they need to be motivated, how they need to be at times reprimanded, right? Like, providing feedback and essentially writing them up. And if it's not working out. So the patience with that process has been a trial by fire learning curve. Nobody is built, at least the very few optometrists come into practice and know how to manage people. And so it's been kind of a step-by-step process. I will say that we've had our wins and our losses. We've hired people that were a nightmare to get rid of, and we've hired people that maybe we wouldn't have hired, and they turned out to be incredible. And the biggest challenge, obviously, is the rising cost of just managing a team at scale. It's not going down, as you know. You run a virtual assistant, company, and so what people call you with and are frustrated about. Like, the cost of my labor to do X, Y, or Z has gotten astronomical, and the reimbursements we're seeing with certain vision care plans or what we do in my clinic, even if we're specializing, it doesn't always meet what we need. And so that's a challenge, right? That's a huge challenge.
How are you dealing with that right now? Any tricks or tips that you can share?
Yeah, so we do have some virtual team members,
Huh?
and so they help out with, essentially, once patients are scheduled, they go through. We have an online appointment book, and they'll take a look at all the demographic information. They can pull in for insurance. They can verify those things. They can help with posting. We trained them on all of those things. So back end filing, and it's helped a lot. But it took a lot to get to that point, and I think we made that jump post COVID, where we're just like, I'm seeing a lot of conversations on social media, and also just talking with our peers within the eye care community, that hiring virtual assistants is a very viable way to bridge the gap, right? To help your team members that are in person be more present with the patients that show up to the office, and let some of these administrative tasks be delegated out to people you trust that you essentially hire on third party.
Nice. Yeah, I think we've come to a similar solution too. So we try to
Right.
be that partner for folks. Yeah, it's hard to do. It's not. We found that it's hard to. You already have the challenges of managing people who are in your face in the office every day. You can see what they're doing. Now in the
Yeah.
remote, there's a whole nother dynamic there that you have to deal with. So
And if you don't mind me asking, because your wife has a practice, right? Was
we have
was
to.
the two practices, right? Um, was the development of your new company, or it's been around for a bit, but right, My Vision Care team, was that based off of the challenges? You're like, you know what, I want to help others, and so I'm seeing so many challenges we're facing in our clinic, and there's a huge opportunity there. Is that kind of how that transpired?
Well, I'll tell the quick story.
Sure.
Basically, right before COVID, we had 4 locations, and we wanted. The problem I noticed was that the last patients of the day never got booked. And I was like, this is not right. You should have appointments on this. This is a high valuable time slot.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I said, we need to centralize it and decouple front desk booking from the office.
Mm.
Whoever's working the office can't be in charge of the booking. So we centralized it, and we had in-office staff relocate to one location, as well as hire remote staff. And then COVID hit, staffing became a challenge, and we just augmented the remote staff.
Wow.
We got over the years, we got good at because hiring, training, firing, developing. There's a whole bunch of nuances and challenges we didn't expect, and people just started asking us for help. And I said, okay. And so enough people asked us. We said, we think we have something here. We're good enough at it. So we started to help other OD offices with it. That's how we got started.
That's incredible. And I've heard so many of our peers take the appointment process and have it done at one centralized space, and I'm evaluating that. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it's a step in the process. It's a leap of faith. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's scary for a lot of people that you talk to, because it's a leap of faith.
It can be, yeah, just similar to what you did with when you took a leap of faith when you had your first lease before having to practice it, and then the second one. It's always a leap of faith when you start something new, but it's there's if you ever read the concept around the flywheel, firing BBs before you fire cannons and rockets, that's kind of what we do. We've kind of started off like, well, let's test it, see if this works, test it, see if it works. Even with clients who are hesitant, we're like, hey, why don't we just run a pilot, see if you like
Yeah,
it? Why don't you secret shop a couple of our clients or secret shop us? What do you think about it? So it kind of eases people into that transition. They get to feel and see it. Similar with staff, right? When we interview staff, we were like, "Hey, this is what the role looks like, and you can shadow us for a couple of hours, and here are the values." So it's interesting you mentioned like, how do you know when is too much is too much? What we say is we have our values in our office, which we call care, curiosity, always on stage, relentless, and elevate. If someone breaks any of those 4 values, it's a non-negotiable, right? But the other part, do they understand the job? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity for it? If and this is by the way, this is from Traction at EOS. But if they're trying, but they don't quite have the skills now, we'll work with them. as long as they have the values. If they don't have the values, even if they're good at the job, we still like, no, this isn't going to work.
Absolutely. I love that. That's huge.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about some things you ran into that you didn't expect when you went from 1 to 2, maybe beyond that.
Yeah, when you go from 1 to 2, you know, if especially if you're the provider that's mostly in the clinic, now you have to trust in your management, your delegation. You can't be everywhere. So you have to build out a system. And that is a challenge in itself because if one office doesn't follow protocol to the other office, you're always trying to refine things. At least I'm always trying to refine things so we have strong policy, procedure, and operational protocols. It's very important to me because I want a patient that shows up at practice A to have the same experience as practice B. Yes, I can't control the individuals that work them up and the doctors that see them, but the system, right? The actual check-in process, everything that we do prior to the patient coming to the clinic. We have a digital intake form. We grab all their insurance. What people are doing post COVID more and more, but even pre COVID, but COVID amplified that, right? Because nobody wanted to touch any paperwork or things when they showed up, and so that was definitely a learning experience. And then going from 2 to 4 was even more crazy because I had relocated to an area and I was able to find a great doctor. She's still with us today. And I was bouncing between offices midday. So I'd start patient care at one office, work a half day, go to the other one. And until we were able to recruit, hire, and onboard the appropriate doctors. It wasn't like I was able to hire doctors prior to relocating out there. I had to relocate out there to be the doctor and also start the business up. And so that was extremely challenging. And North Carolina in itself, hiring
It's hard.
doctors
Yeah.
is hard. North Carolina is extra hard. So,
I've heard. I have friends in North Carolina who, without getting too much into politics, the approval process is a little more rigorous than other states, is what I hear.
there's a
So,
challenge. Yeah, there's a challenge. And it's one of the most, if not the most challenging state to get a license in.
so I'm curious, how do you deal with that? Like, you see a lot of big companies just go remote eye exams. I don't know if that's legal in North Carolina. It is in Georgia, so we see that here. But I don't know. Do you see that, or how are you dealing with it?
Yeah, we see it. And I would always rather have an in-person doctor. So we have never implemented it. Do we have the technology to do so? Yeah, we do. But we haven't really shared it out. We haven't tested it out because I would much rather have the doctor there in person. Now, I'm also not apprehensive long term to technological advancements that would allow us to provide remote optometric care with the right systems in place. And so, if I had a certified ophthalmic tech who was just a rock star at collecting data and getting everything there, and we had perfect internet speed and the right systems to remote in and do so, I would be more open to it. But we have a few limitations state law wise that
Yeah.
it's not even, the juice isn't worth the squeeze there. So recruiting, I'm always recruiting. I'm always trying to find the right people to join our team for the short term, for the long term, whether it's part time, whether it's full time. And that's kind of the hat that I wear in the practice, is always be recruiting. And it's not just for doctors, but it's also for the right people for the team to help build out your staff, because things happen, as you know. You may have an incredible staff member and then a couple of years go by and something happens, they have to relocate or they quit for another job, or there's a laundry list of reasons why you're going to always have to be recruiting and rebuilding. And so if you have a strong system in place, it's very impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you're one of the few doctors who had a different career and focused on business prior to getting the multi ownership. How do you think that helped you? More importantly, I'm actually more curious about the second part of this question. What do you think might have set you back, or was not an advantage to have that? Was there anything that was like, well, I was told this and I didn't see that. It was different in our industry and I didn't take that into account, or something like that? Where did you find the standard business school type education not as helpful?
Yeah. I probably got into my sophomore to junior. It was right transitioning from sophomore to junior year where I shifted from a business major at Michigan State to a nutritional science major. So a lot of the core classes that I was taking, they were the fundamental foundational pieces. I wouldn't say I was an expert by any means. I was just somebody going through the process of getting a business degree. The recruiting job that I took and did for 4 summers was extremely impactful. Just understanding the nuances of hiring and firing and the need to how long it takes sometimes to find the right person, and how expensive that process can really be, especially if you find the right person. Sometimes I see doctors go into these conversations like, well, they want a little bit more money. Well, yeah, are you doing annual assessments to retain talent, right? Is it worth it to pay somebody a little bit more and retain them over time instead of being firm on what you're comfortable with and then spending all that time, energy, and effort. And the time is the greatest asset we all have to go and find somebody new. So you have to have those conversations internally. What I didn't expect is just what I was geared for. What I was recruiting for was professionals in a different vertical. So recruiting optometrists and also finding support staff members, whether it's a managerial role or an entry level role. You're just talking and working with people of different backgrounds and educational levels a lot of times. And so that piece in itself, recruiting and people management will always be hard, but you need to understand who are you recruiting and what can you get out of them based off of maybe what you're offering.
Yeah, now you've seen both sides of the coin, right? You know what it takes in the office and you know what it takes on the recruiting side. Maybe there's a future there for you too. Another
Possibly.
yeah.
Yeah, who knows,
And there's definitely demand. So
I know.
So let's talk about Greenfield, Future State. How many locations do you have now?
We have 4 locations. So 2 in North Charlotte and 2 in Asheville, North Carolina.
Let's say you had to triple that and that was your goal. That's your BHAG for the next 5 years. Let's talk us through the process that you would go to do that. Like, I want to hear your thought process and how you think about that challenge as you grow your empire.
Sure. I would never take on 2 locations or more than 1 location at a time, first and foremost, ever again. I don't think that it's especially in the state of having the appropriate doctor coverage and staff build out. I would do it one at a time. It would be intentional. You'd have a business plan prior. And I had a business plan prior to doing the 2 location acquisition, but slow and steady, making sure that you get everything up and running before you do the next location. For me right now with the business relationship I have with LensCrafters, it's subject to doing so adjacent to their location. Could I go and partner with other, corporations that have sublease spaces? Absolutely, I could. Could I go and, open up my own private office and try to scale that? Yeah, but it'd be a conflict of interest for LensCrafters long term. But, the structure that I have aside of the business model, 1 location at a time, being patient with the process, making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's, have the right people in place, have the right systems in place. And then once you feel like that makes sense, start researching the next opportunity. Now, to further address your question, I would never take it from 4 to 12. I think 4 to 12, I want to live a life that is intentional and fulfilling. And I think taking it from 4 to 12 with that kind of coverage, we have 7 days a week coverage, would be very, very challenging unless I built out a massive organizational hierarchy. And at that point, I'm not sure that the stress is really what I would want at that time. And I say that now, like, of course I want to scale and grow a little bit more, but man, 3Xing, 4Xing, that to me right now is overwhelming. Yeah. Ask me in 5-10 years, but that's overwhelming.
What would be something that you're looking forward to in the future with the field, your practice? What is something you're looking forward to?
I'm excited to see how optometry continues to evolve. So when I first decided to become an optometrist and I look at the profession now, the technological advancements that we have in place and the way that we can provide care is different, right? There's a lot of innovation in the world of technology, whether it's diagnostic equipment, whether it's teleoptometry, whether it's, how we partner with third parties and how we partner with, different professionals in our space. I feel that we need to continue to own that we are the primary eye care providers in the healthcare space because there's such a need and demand. Yeah. And, the number of ophthalmologists is not keeping up with the overall need for medical eye care. So if we can take care of the primary eye health and medical needs of our patients to a high level before we have to refer, I'm excited to see what that continues to look like, as well as some of the technological advancements that artificial intelligence and, there's just so many cool things that are being researched and studied. What's going to pan out and how is it going to impact our ability to provide patient care?
That last point, I'm kind of excited about that too, because I could see a world where optometry becomes more and more primary care. Mainly because the cells in the eye, as most folks know, is really sensitive to change. You'll see there first before you see elsewhere. And with AI, people are starting to pick up a lot of diseases way earlier by OCTs, retinal images, just simple imaging scans that they're doing some regression analysis on and figuring out, hey, guess what? This is related to heart disease. And we never knew that before. And so things like that are going to be coming out. So just with a few scans, it'll be kind of interesting to see all the different pieces of information that we'll find out about your health, not just your vision. So I agree with you. That's gonna be cool.
And I'll be honest. The reason one of the main reasons I went to optometry is to practice preventative healthcare. I was doing a lot of research on different healthcare fields, and a lot of it's catastrophic. You're putting out a fire that's really too far down. The force is already burning down. And I didn't like that. And I wanted to be more uplifting and be preventative instead of delivering the news that, hey, like you're gonna lose your life in 5 years, or you're gonna lose X, Y, or Z ability in 5 years unless we change. Um, so those things to me, that's a really important part of what we do. And if we continue to hone it and own it with all the technological advancements in artificial intelligence, the sky's the limit for optometry.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah,
So, uh, let's shift gears a little bit. I'd like to ask, what made you you? And so, Ryan, can you tell me some formative moments in your life that you felt like were really, you know what, this has really made a big impact on my life? Usually it's something visceral. Could be something as young as first grade, or could have been in college, or even last week, right? Who knows?
sure.
Can you share a moment or two with us that really helped form you who you are?
Yeah, so I am one of four children. I have three older sisters. And so, I was like their baby doll growing up practically. And I had to learn to communicate amongst, my mom and three sisters. My dad was working a lot. So, to get a word in. And so just my ability to navigate conversations with people in general, but also, the opposite sex. And now I look at my team of people that we have, and I would say the vast majority of them are females. So being raised in that environment, having a mom and three older sisters has definitely molded me into the individual that I am to a certain degree, especially from a communication perspective. One of the things that's molded me into my drive in optometry, and I'll never forget this, I went to run for class president first year.
Okay.
And I was coming out of undergrad. And so I went to undergrad at Michigan State. And then I went to optometry school at Ohio State. And I came out of undergrad with a little bit of swagger, probably some arrogance to myself, and like anybody might out of undergrad. And I did not prepare at all for this speech that I had to give in front of the class. I thought I could kind of wing it. I thought that, quite frankly, my stuff didn't stink, right? I'm like, I'm gonna get this, right? And I'll never forget it. My good friend Lindsay Diefenbacher, she was a classmate that went to optometry school at Ohio State, or so undergrad at Ohio State, and she graduated. She finished in 3 years, so she actually jumped into optometry school, like really ambitious, really charismatic, very sweet. And she delivered this incredible speech. I'm talking knock it out of the park. And I had to walk in after her, and I'm like, there is no way in hell that I'm going to influence my classmates to vote for me. And sure enough, I got my butt handed to me. And so when I later got more involved in school, I was part of the American Optometric Student Association, and I was one of the school representatives as trustee elect and then trustee. And I decided to run for the board, which is the executive position. And I made sure that I had evaluated every possible way that I could deliver that speech to the group that we had at that time because of my experience prior. And so it kind of lit a fire in me, losing the election that I had gone through, but also prepped me for future instances, as well as just making sure when you're delivering meaningful information, you're trying to influence people's decisions, prep beforehand, right? Don't go in blind. If you know that you have something coming up, make sure that you're prepared, that you take the time to analyze what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and really that has transpired a lot to me. So
It's funny. Usually the saying goes, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. For you, it's the other way around. You got
yeah.
punched in the mouth. Now you have a plan to go in. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I didn't know, man. I was like, gosh,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they vote for me? I'm awesome. Like I literally, like I look back and I'm like, what an embarrassment, man. What a silly guy I was at that point. But it was a pivotal time where I was coming from undergrad where I felt like I could kind of skate by. And then I went to optometry school and it helped me reset and refocus. Like, you need to take this seriously. You need to work hard. You need to be professional. And I'll never forget that. And I was, I'm thankful for it now, and even thankful for it then. Lindsay and I have a great relationship, and I joke with her, I'm like, you kicked my butt in that. You really did.
That's fun. That's a good story. So let's do a little time traveling now. Let's say you can go back in time to 4 days after you graduated OD school. What would you tell your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. So during optometry school, I feel like I was always continuously worrying about the next test, the next practical, the next thing in my education. What am I going to do after I get out? Where am I going to practice? How am I going to practice? And so if I could talk to myself then, I would simply say, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't worry about what you can't control. Be present in the moment. Enjoy every opportunity you have. Of course, have a plan, right? Build habits, build systems, have goals. But I think I had so much anxiety throughout certain parts of optometry school because I was just irrationally worried about not succeeding, not meeting the criteria I need to become an optometrist. And so things will work out in ways that they're meant to work out, right? Things will absolutely work out if you put in the effort and you put in the energy over time. It may not be what you actually planned, but what needs to transpire will transpire. And so if I could just go back and say, don't sweat the small stuff, don't worry about it. You're going to get out of here. You're going to do a great job. Enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. That's what I would say.
Nice. I like that. Keep calm, carry on.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
There's a lot to worry about in this
Right.
world. And if you get caught in that rabbit hole, that's not a fun one to be in.
No, it's not. So what do you do for fun outside of work? Like what does Ryan do for leave steam or just hang out? I'm curious. What do you do?
Yeah, so my wife and I have two young children, a 4-year-old, and my daughter turns 7 on Sunday. And I love my kids with all my heart. So they're my big part of my why is my family. So hanging out with my family. I love sports. I love watching college football, the NFL, college basketball, and then the NBA when it hits playoff time. So tune into those things. I even kind of nerd out a little bit on like fantasy football, and we have a couple leagues with buddies locally and guys back home. And then
Nice.
yeah, I try to stay active. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I enjoy working out. I don't play basketball like I did growing up anymore out of concerns or small fears of like tearing like an ACL or something.
Yeah.
I've just seen too many, horror stories. I'm in my late 30s now. It's just not worth it. But that's really what I like to do. I like to tune into those things. And that's probably the biggest thing. My wife and I are also foodies. So,
Nice.
I live in Asheville now. Our world's been turned upside down, but we have had historically had a really good food art scene, and it's gonna come back. It's gonna have a resurgence, but for the time being, that's kind of tapered.
Yeah. Hopefully, I have a few friends there too. They said it's going to take some time, but it's getting there. Hopefully. So hopefully all your folks are staying safe. So
Thank you. Yeah, everybody's okay. It's just if you were to ask, because I know some of the prep that we had, if you were to ask like biggest challenge, well, the current biggest challenge is the unknown of certain things that happen. When COVID hit,
Yeah.
man, that rocked our entire world. But right now, where the hurricane hit and how it's impacted us, if you drive outside of the hurricane area, it's like life is normal. So it's a really weird position to be in where your life's been turned upside down with how it's impacted your community, some of your team members, practice locations, and how they can operate. And so, just being patient with and understanding with that and controlling what you can control to the best of your ability.
Yeah. So the two things I got from here is learning to read the currents and the winds and keep calm and carry on.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Listen, persistence is absolutely critical if you want to build and scale and grow an empire or just be happy in your professional career, because it's not all rainbows and butterflies. But if you sit there and you just focus on those negatives, I'm an optimist at heart. You're not going to go anywhere if you just focus on the negative and complain about it. You can acknowledge it. You can let your feelings and emotions settle, and then you can turn the page and move forward with your career and your life.
Yeah. And to build on the optimism thing, what I've heard is the optimism is the wind in the sails, to stick with the sailing metaphor, and the eye on the ball, or quote unquote negativity, or hey, where the problem is, the rudder to steer you in the right direction.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. I love that analogy, man. I've never heard that analogy, and I'm gonna definitely keep that one in my back pocket. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I figured I'd stick with the boat metaphor. So
yeah.
So where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy to get a hold of me. I'm active on LinkedIn under just Ryan Corte, and then my social media handle is Ryan Reflects. So I like to share a lot of positive and inspirational content. More so now aligned just to optometrists and how they can be successful in their journey. And as I referenced to you earlier, in 2025, I anticipate launching a podcast, and just inspired by people like you and people that are making a difference in our profession. And I feel like it's something that if anybody wants to reach out and connect with me on social or via LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to do so.
Great. Well, thank you again, Dr. Ryan Corte. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and it was a great time chatting.
Yeah. And thank you, audience. If you learned something, laugh, please like and share with your friends, either the YouTube videos or the podcast. Thank you again, Ryan. And this has been another great episode of Optometrists Building Empires. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My business care team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.